Hey everyone, it's Dr. Troy Shaw. This is Modern Martial Arts and Health Radio, presented by Ground Dragon Martial Arts. And I'm just welcoming you here for the second episode of the podcast. I got a really good one for you guys today, and I think you're really gonna like it. So, just kind of stay tuned. And we're going to get to the interview with Tim Cartmell in just a second here. Now, just as a brief beginning, there's a lot of concern going on around about this coronavirus. And it's primarily centered in China, Wuhan, Beijing. And that seems to be, as far as I've seen of all the details of it so far, where all the deaths have occurred, and it's a shame that this has happened. Now there's been some further developments. I believe there's a cruise off of the coast of Japan that is now quarantined. But what I just want to kind of encourage all of you to really be aware of is taking care of your health. Okay. And that means to make sure you're getting enough rest, drinking plenty of water, whether that's regular water or through some tea or coffee and stuff like that. But just got to keep in mind that this is really super important that you take care of your health, get some regular exercise in, but don't go too extreme on your training. Sometimes when we are, maybe we're starting out or we're stepping up the level for some sort of competition or something like that, we get a little too excited too quickly. Really learn to pace yourself, step up your training, and just kind of focus on getting in some quality time working on the things you really need to work on at first, and then build up slowly for it. Making sure that you do give yourself enough time. And also maintaining some level of fitness year round so that when you do have to step it up, you're able to step it up safely without getting, sick or getting injured because you've reduced your immune system, and because it's, just trying to be overactive, it's gotten overactive from your training. And the other thing is, make sure that you're getting that regular care in. And that could be through acupuncture, chiropractic, whether, you're going to see a physical therapist or something like that. Make sure you're really taking care of your body. You're keeping that motion and movement in there, and it's healthy and it's functional, and you're not isolating body parts all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. If you do bodybuilding and you do martial arts, fantastic, good for you. Just make sure that you are also getting that functional training in as well. All right, without further ado, make sure you obviously take care of yourself. And I did a really great interview with Tim Cartmell. I think you guys are really gonna love it, and I think he talks a lot about good stuff with training, martial arts, and things like that. And we talk about anywhere from Chinese martial arts and training in China, training in Taiwan, training here in the U.S. with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. All right, here it is. Okay, so I'm here with Tim Cartmell. He's a martial artist, best known as author and translator. And he's an 8th degree black belt in Kung-Fu San Soo. Spent 11 years in Taiwan and Mainland China, training in the Chinese internal martial arts, and a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Fought in Sanda during the 1980s in Taiwan, and placed first at the 2003 IBJJF Pan Championship as a brown belt, and first at the 2004 IBJJF Pan Championship as a black belt. And sorry for that paltry introduction there, Tim, but how's it going? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So took a little while for us to get this warmed up. Hopefully this is working and we don't have to do this again. But Tell me a little bit about just kind of your background. We don't have to go too much detail, but what got you into the martial arts and how long you've been doing it?
Um, I started when I was about 11. So, we used to kind of scrap a lot when I was a kid, and I think in grade school, one of the kids in school when I was younger, probably like 8 or 9, started taking karate, and I'd never heard of any martial art besides boxing at the time.
Hmm.
So, he would talk about it, and it was fascinating. I never heard of Asian martial arts, so I was intrigued by it. And then when I was probably, I must have been like 10 or 11, the Kung Fu series came on TV. And so I heard of Kung Fu, so I bugged my dad about doing martial arts. And I did Taekwondo for a while, like every little kid. And when I was 11, I started practicing Kung Fu San Soo. So that was basically how it started. And I practiced San Soo until I was 23, and I moved to Taiwan. And then in Taiwan, I practiced the internal martial arts primarily, and a few other things, and then started to compete in Sanda. And I fought for a couple years. And I was there about 11 years, and then came back to the States and started practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that's pretty much the background.
Nice, nice. And a lot of times, with the Chinese martial arts and stuff like that, um, especially with the internal martial arts, there's a lot of talk about, you know, chi and cultivating all this different type of stuff. Um, but from what you've told me in the past, that a lot of your training was a lot more physical than maybe some people realize. What what was that really like for you? Was there a huge emphasis on kind of fitness and conditioning as well as the actual training of forms and all that type of stuff?
So, I mean, a lot of it depended on what you're looking for. So I always look for something that was practical. I wanted to have some actual fight skills and kind of test it. That's always been my emphasis. So, I mean, I can't speak for other lineages or teachers or styles. You know what I mean? So, it was all pretty much hard training. So,
Hmm.
but I don't want people to get the impression that that's all anyone did. I'm sure other teachers and lineages had different takes on it. But
Right.
I look for people who had actual skills, like demonstrable skills.
Hmm.
And in the internal, even in Taiwan and the mainland, when I was there, few and far between. Well, actually, most traditional kung fu, the majority of the training was kind of health oriented or preserving a style or forms
Right.
oriented. So not so many people interested in actual fighting.
Hmm.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people, of course, I didn't know about, but that's what I look for. So when I first started practicing, I started practicing Xingyiquan, and the school I was in was one of the very few that on the island in Taiwan that actually um, had a lot of kind of hard conditioning and free sparring training, and a
Hmm.
lot of the students would actually compete in tournaments. So again, I was attracted to that, so that's where I went, and
Right.
it was just a lot of there was a lot of a class would training session might be an hour of conditioning, like just push-ups, sit-ups, calisthenics, a lot of jump kicks, that kind of thing, just conditioning. And then we do everything. We do forms. Forms are very important. Forms are a lot of schools seem to emphasize them as kind of the be all and end all, but
Yeah.
and then other people think they're useless, but they're an important part of the system, but they're just one part of the system. So besides conditioning, there was stance, holding, there were forms training, and then technique training, and then all kinds of sparring drills. So that's pretty much standard in any fight school, I think. So
Hmm.
that was my background. There's very little, if any, talk about any kind of esoteric energies or powers. That might be more along if you're into the qigong, you know,
Right.
qigong aspects of things. And that was my experience with all my teachers, pretty much.
Okay. With with the Shingi school that you started with in Taiwan, I believe that was Shu Hongji's school, as well as his son, right? You mentioned before there was a lot of hard conditioning, a lot of physical fitness. But the forms were also included and important in that. Did that fluctuate at all when you guys were preparing for any type of competition? Was there, did you focus more on forms when you weren't preparing, or less on forms when you were, and more on conditioning, sparring, stuff like that?
Well, classes were usually, the training sessions were pretty much always the same formula, but
Yeah.
when there was a competition or people were going to compete, there'd be, it would depend on the venue, but there'd be maybe more emphasis on sparring, kind of like geared towards whatever the venue would be. It's hard to explain. We always sparred in every class, so it might be more intense, or sometimes you had to wear certain gear. So my teacher would have us wear that gear when we sparred. You know what I mean? So everything,
Okay.
the training might be more geared towards an individual event, but we did pretty much the same things every time. There was always the same formula, like warm up, conditioning, standing forms, technique, sparring. That didn't really change.
Right. Right. And did you experience it that way a lot with training in the mainland too? I know you didn't really compete in the mainland with anything, but did you experience that to some degree as well with your other teachers there?
Most of the teachers that I trained with in the mainland, there was no sparring like
Okay.
there was in the like in Shonji's school.
Okay.
So when I trained there, I usually trained. It's not because they didn't. It was most of it was I would train privately with them in the mainland.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So it was
Okay.
kind of a different. It wasn't like there weren't academies. They teach in the park or at home,
Right.
and or in small groups. So it was a different kind of um, situation. The whole atmosphere was different. So there would be it didn't depend. It depended. Some of the teachers I had, I was just interested in certain aspects of what they did too. So I
Right.
would just practice that. So it was a lot of their basics and their forms, and then they'd show techniques. But a lot of my teachers were older, so and it was me and them. There was obviously at that point there was not going to be any kind of hard sparring.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which, well, yeah, makes total sense. You wouldn't be want to be doing that with them, and um, a lot of times you've talked about Shingi Master Liang Kuchen, and
Mm-hmm.
some of his teaching, stuff like that, and he was always seemed to be more emphasizing kind of the practical aspects of it as well. What was your experience like training with him?
Yeah, Liang Keqian was exceptional. Um, he he taught kind of in a traditional manner. There was basics and a lot of form training. He
Mm.
was very um, big on kind of the old school idea of lots and lots of repetition of the forms,
Mm.
and he had like variations on the elements, a lot of different. Most schools have the five elements. He had a lot of variations on the five elements, and he put a big emphasis on just basically drilling the movements. And
Right.
then I did actually. He had a few students that were Sanda fighters that had trained with him. One of his longtime students was a Sanda coach, so
Mm.
I sparred with those guys. Those guys would come
Wow.
and it was interesting. It was interesting as well. A lot of those kids had started with Sanda and then later on wanted to learn like a traditional style, which I thought was a testament to Liang's skill.
Right.
So there was a lot of forms training, and then he would kind of break it down into technique, and
Yeah.
and that's pretty much how he taught. And then he was older, of course, when I started training with him. He was pretty rugged guy. He would show he had a lot of fighting experience as well. So
Yeah.
he would kind of convey that, and then I would spar with some of the younger students, and it was all practical. There was nothing that he ever showed me, form wise or otherwise, that he couldn't show a practical application for.
Right. Right. Uh, Given the kind of current state of Chinese martial arts nowadays, do you do you see any of these types of teachers, practitioners nowadays in Taiwan, mainland China? I know you recently just came back from Taiwan,
Yeah,
uh,
last week.
doing some teaching stuff like that there with BJJ and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Do
Right.
do you see any of that still, or
Well,
is it kind of dying?
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just, or is it kind of dying off there?
I don't have much to do with kind of traditional teachers anymore.
Right.
I haven't. I'm not really in that world so much. There's a lot more MMA. So
Okay.
in Taiwan especially. So
Yeah.
the last few times I've been, like I taught in Shanghai a few years ago. I just got back from Taiwan, so I teach jiu-jitsu mostly when I go, or things
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu or things related to MMA. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's still plenty of traditional martial arts, of course.
Yeah.
What they do, I don't, I'm not. I mean, I don't. I only know what my teachers are up to, and my teachers in the mainland now. Most of my old teachers have, unfortunately, they've all passed away.
Right.
So I'm not really, I don't really know what's going on in that
Okay.
world.
Okay. What is your current opinion on the whole events right now surrounding kind of the Shushadong fake teachers, all this type of stuff,
Um,
and
Shisha
yeah.
they're super entertaining, obviously.
Yeah.
Shisha I feel, uh, there's probably different ways you could bring things to light. You can say what you want about Shisha and his methods, but I think it's good. All in
Yeah.
all, it's been good. It's one of those things where it's always been that way as well. There's a lot of claims made
Yeah.
with nothing to back them up, and I feel like I mean, you should be able to back up whatever you're claiming. So
Right.
Xu Xiaodong is kind of brought a lot of that to light.
Yeah.
Now you could say, the people that challenged him are not not the best guy. You can say whatever you want, but yeah,
Yeah.
props to them for stepping up, and then you can see, you get a pretty clear picture of, if you don't train correctly for actual fighting,
Right.
you just won't be able to fight. And I
Right.
don't know why I mean, anyone who's done an actual combat sport or a martial art that includes, real fight training, it's a given. I mean,
Right.
it would seem completely obvious, but I mean, still apparently it's not. So I
Right.
feel like it's been, besides just being entertaining, it's been enlightening. And people also too will watch Shisha don't beat someone up and criticize that style. And I've been saying forever, it's not the styles per se that don't work, or it's the way you train, right? So
Yeah.
he beats up a Wing Chun guy, and people go, "See, Wing Chun sucks." That's the wrong take. You have to look at how they trained, right? And
Yeah.
I think pretty much across the board, what you'll see is people that are ill prepared for someone who has real skill,
Hmm.
right, as a fighter. And Shisha Dong, he's not a top rate, MMA fighter. He's an
Hmm.
average guy, an
Yeah.
average guy. He's trained obviously at MMA, but he's not like a world class MMA fighter. But you can see someone like that who has some real fight training. How far superior they are to people that don't. So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, and people that are inside certain styles, you have to step outside your style. You can't be very good at push hands and expect to really fight, or very good at shisa and expect to really fight, or what I mean. Very good. You've got to see how that's going to apply for real outside your own, the
Right.
confines of different styles.
Right.
So I think all in all, it's a good trend.
Okay. Well, I know one thing what I experienced when I first came to your school, the Shenwu Academy, back in 2005, and it was a little bit of a culture shock to have someone hold pads for me in a Shingi Bagua class.
Mm.
But at the same time, I really kind of liked it because it really it added kind of a new element to it where it wasn't just training solo forms and techniques and stuff like that. And what made you kind of add that type of stuff into the training? Did you have that type of stuff when you were training in Taiwan and China?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't learn to hit things unless you hit things, right?
Right.
So um, not all the schools, but yeah. In the fight schools, yeah, we hit pads. We did all kinds of drills. Yeah, with the same pad. Now when I train Shingi guys, fighters, I use the same. You can make up your own combos. But the same basic formula that I learned.
Yeah.
I learned it in Taiwan. Yeah, I learned it. I learned all that, and we hit pads there. So, I might have my own take on it, and from my boxing training and that kind of thing. But no, yeah. I mean, I think that traditionally, traditional martial arts have always hit something.
Right.
You know what I mean? They've done some kind of pad work.
Yeah. And how often are you really kind of teaching more of the traditional two-man stuff as well? Because that seems to have a kind of a nice transition into more of the free sparring stuff, whether it's Shingi Bagua.
Two-person forms, the set forms.
Yeah.
Yeah, I teach them. So they're, especially in like Xingyiquan's a good example. So they're meant to be, kind of a bridge between your solo training and kind of just practicing techniques into free sparring. So they're useful, done, I think, in the right context. They're not vital. The best fighters in the world never learn anything like that. You know what I mean? It's not like you can't learn to fight from them, but you learn. There's a lot of interesting things with two-person forms. You'll start to learn distance management, right? And to correct timing, angles of attack and defense. And once you have the form down, the criticism might be, there's set forms, what's coming. But the upside to that is you know what I'm going to do next, so I'm going to throw it with 100% force because you know it's coming. So if you're daydreaming and get hit, it's your fault. So I get to make some on the offense side of the form. I get to make an actual committed attack at you, and you have to actually defend a committed attack, even though it's what's coming. It's you still get used to that kind of force and pressure. So. Right. A lot of those things will all carry over, but of course you have to take the next step and free spar. But I think a lot of people again discount them as kind of archaic, useless training. But I feel done in the right context and put into the context of a whole system, they're pretty ingenious methods.
Yeah. So as I understand, you are a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Kleber Luciano,
Correct.
And. When did you get your black belt, and what degree are you at now?
I'm a fourth degree black belt. See, I got my black belt. I can't remember the year even now. Let's see. I've been a black belt probably 15 years now, I guess. So
okay.
It's been quite a while.
Yeah.
So that was Kleber's first black belt, and. Okay. Yeah, I started training in '95, and I got my black belt fairly quickly. I think 2003.
Okay.
I got my black belt. So,
yeah.
From Kleber, I had a couple teachers before, and then I was with Kleber from blue belt all the way to black belt.
What got you into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
The ground fight first. So I come back to teach a seminar, and I want to say 93 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I was still living in Taiwan, and it's an interesting story. And I got a black belt magazine, and in the very back they had like little quarter-page ads.
Right.
And I saw an ad that said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu real fights, and I was like, there's no such thing as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it said real fights, right? So it was like a VHS tape, so I bought it, and it was the Gracie in Action 1 tape. And so I watched it, and it was I was completely impressed. So. Yeah. They're kind of like method of closing the distance and clinch, and they take the whole, the whole thing I really like. But the thing was they really, I'd wrestled a little bit before, but this was all geared towards fighting for real on the ground.
Right.
And of course that's almost not completely, but almost completely lacking in Chinese martial arts to a very high degree.
Right.
And I had been on the ground in fights, so I was like, this looks like good stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway. The next time I came back a year later, and there was a teacher, Nelson Monteiro, in San Diego. There are hardly any teachers here yet. And Nelson's a guy that actually started the Abu Dhabi Fight Club. His student then. And I went down and had a few private lessons. It was really good stuff. And I went back to Taiwan, and then that next year the UFC came. the first UFC started. And after Royce won, by the time I came back in '95. I mean, there were, you know, it was like, it seemed like every Brazilian black belt that could afford a plane ticket was in Southern California. So there's a lot of schools around. So that's when I started training. You know, I started training when I got back.
Right.
There were a lot of really high level Brazilian black belt teachers here. So at first I thought, you know, I'll train in a few years, and kind of, you know, I wanted to just be proficient at ground fighting. And then I got into it. I got totally into it, and it was another avenue to compete in, because I like the competition. So, you know, I started competing, and then I started competing in no-gi and submissions grappling, and I kept, you know, I just kept going, and I fought at pro, actually, as a submissions grappling for a year or two in my late 40s, actually, and so it was a lot of fun. A lot of just competition part. So that's kind of the thing. So people don't realize as well, sport jiu-jitsu is one part of the whole curriculum, and it's obviously now the dominant, you know, aspect everyone sees. But traditional kind of Gracie jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, there's what they call self-defense. Yeah. Then there's weapons defenses, and then there's what they would call sport fighting, and it's divided into grappling and then MMA. You know, they called it Valley Two back in the day. And back in the day, you know, it was about 1/3 of it was on the ground. The rest of it was stand-up. So that's kind of unfortunately fallen by the wayside. You know, people didn't want to do the sport ground fight part. But it was good back then. There was a lot of, you know, we wore gloves a lot, and we started standing up, and there were challenge fights still back then and all that kind of thing. So it was, for me, it was a good time to get into it.
Other than the ground aspect, what was the one thing that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu seemed to have that you were really not kind of seeing in you know, in the Chinese martial arts?
Well, so basically, say a basic old school kind of fight curriculum. They talked about distance management, which of course every martial arts have, but their goal was very, very close to what I learned in internal. All three of the internal, you know, Xingyiquan, Baguazhang, and the Taijiquan. They're pretty close in fighting systems, right? They're not fighting at a kind of an outside distance like some kickboxing styles might do, and that distance I understood already. Right. The difference would be when in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, when you got close, for the most part, in most cases, you're going to clinch, and you're going to try to clinch from in a superior position so that you could control the opponent's balance and his use of force, and then you can hit him without being hit back, or usually you take him to the ground, right? And then you dominate on top, or you can follow up and run away, kind of thing. So that part appealed to me because of the close-in kind of fighting that I'd learned. Right. So that was all, you know, the name of the takedowns. I mean, I learned there wasn't really any throws that were throws, you know. Yeah. So I'd learned most of the takedowns from the Chinese styles. You know, the basic takedowns are kind of the same. Right. The difference was really the immediate put the guy on the ground idea, and then of course the fighting. And they were good. There's a lot of jiu-jitsu too. Again, sport fighting you don't see as much because you have to roll around on the ground, and everybody knows jiu-jitsu, but in kind of self-defense based Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you never want to go to the ground. Like, there are no legit old school teachers going to tell you to go to the ground. It's just to back yourself up in case you're on the ground. Sport fighting is different. So you throw the guy on the ground really hard. Usually control like knee on belly, so you're kind of mobile. You're pinning him, but you're not committed to the ground, and then you hit him. Yeah. And you know, that kind of thing it's very, very practical. The one thing they had though is you're expected, I mean, within months to have real self-defense skills. So they don't have this idea of it doesn't have to be perfect yet. You don't have to have some kind of like ultra developed special power or anything. It's pretty much based on leverage. You know what I mean? So if you're in average shape and you understand what to do against, you know, like your average guy that's just gonna try to punch in a street fight, you'll have real skill. And I felt like in Shingi school we did, like, you know, I started competing there in Sanda with probably less than a year's training. They had the same idea, like you should be able to fight within a year, at least at a basic level. You see a lot of other traditional martial arts with just ridiculous ideas of, how long it takes to have, you got to stand for 3 years, and then it takes so many years to develop, by then you'll never catch up with someone doing jiu-jitsu, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing any MMA. So
right.
those ridiculous notions of, decades of training for proficiency, and that's, you can get better at something forever. I mean, you can master to
Yeah.
truly master something, but you want, like any real art, you should get basic, totally applicable skills in a short amount of time, and then you can spend a whole lifetime, improving and trying to master it, right? Not a whole lifetime, and then you maybe got it, and you maybe still have no skill at all. So
Yeah.
that was attractive, and the thing was, especially back in the day, if you were relatively in shape, I do the same thing. You saw it at the old Shenwu Academy, where I do it now at the you start sparring the first day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
At least on level, there's no, you get some day, or at least in a couple of weeks, you get to start sparring at whatever level, right? Whether it's, I teach you to cover your head and I punch you with gloves, or start practicing, defending takedowns, defenses on the ground. So very, very quickly you get practical skill, and there's no question kind of what you could really do, because you're the one really doing it. So it's not like, well, my teacher could do this, or somebody back in the day beat so and so. It only matters what you can do.
Right.
And sparring also, right off the bat, is a laboratory for the level you're at and what you need to work on, or what you can develop and that kind of thing. So jiu-jitsu's all about that. Most sport martial arts are about that. You're expected to be able to use it fairly quickly, right? At least at a basic level. But as far as jiu-jitsu doesn't have any stand-up, any magic techniques or anything that other martial arts don't have. It's the strategy, and there's an absolutely clear-cut strategy of what you're going to do. Same thing on the ground.
Right. It sounds like the practicality really is the strong aspect of jiu-jitsu, of any kind of martial art, is that when you focus on that seems to be what really develops skill really quickly.
Yeah, exactly. So, you read about, if you read some of Sun Wukong's old writings, they expect, if you did Taiji, they expect you to have self-defense skill in a matter of months. Now, and people argue with me, it's like, he wrote it. It's, it doesn't, they're not talking about being a master of something like Taiji in a few months, but they're talking about, you come in and in a relatively short period of time, you have some actual skill. You know what I mean? That I always say, it's this kind of idea of, if you get drafted, boot camp's 3 months, not 8 years, right? And they expect you to go to war. I mean, you'd think that would be a lot more serious than having a guy throw a hook at your head or something. But, people have this idea of training for long periods of time, which is absent in like sport fighting things, or real self-defense martial arts. So I feel, people who are training in anything, if they're looking for, I say all the time, there's a lot of different reasons to practice martial arts, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're designed originally for fighting. It's a martial art, but you might choose a martial art and it's just a cultural thing, or it's an exercise thing, or self-cultivation. All those are legit reasons to train.
Right.
If you're going to train because you want to fight, if you're not fighting, you're not learning that. So you gotta be clear on your goal, and if it's like I always, a good analogy, you take your kid to swimming lessons, and you say, look, he's not going to be Michael Phelps, but I don't, if he falls in the pool, I don't want him to drown. And if the teacher said, well, after 4 or 5 years of basic swimming, he maybe, you think it was ridiculous, right? This is for fighting.
Yeah.
So he's not going to be an Olympic swimmer in a short amount of time, obviously, but he should at least be able to, dog paddle, right, and not drown. So you got to look at it that way, I feel. So that's for any martial art if you want to learn to fight.
Right. So would you say that maybe after you focused on kind of the fighting, and you've gotten older, you're maybe not spending so much time on it, you could spend more time on kind of the health building aspects of it, the kind of the personal self-cultivation, all that type of stuff would still be a benefit, even though you maybe spent time at the beginning more on the more martial fighting aspects of it.
Sure. I mean, you can start, you should be some self-cultivation and health developing when you're young too, right?
Yeah.
Well, that should go along with, especially if because when you fight, you get banged up. So, all that stuff's important. But I know, I understand your question. Sure.
Yeah.
So you get older, you can still, you should still be able to do some non-cooperative training at various levels, right? If you're into a martial art. So, obviously you're going to tone things down at a certain age, but there's still different ways to practice, right?
Yeah.
Now, at a certain point, you might say, I don't care anymore. I learned how to fight. I'm done with all that. I don't compete anymore, and I want to do it like solely for kind of health and exercise. Of course, perfectly legit as well, and that's legit when you're young. You don't have to fight. Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of. It depends. A lot of people tend to. I think. What's the good term? Like they sell themselves short on things as well. Mm. Like I get people that tell me, because I'll grapple a lot of rounds a week still. I roll. I do it for a living, so I train a lot. I mean, I might be not the best example, but people get to be say 40 or 45. They think they're too old. It's crazy. You can do. There's a lot of 70-year-old, over 70-year-old jiu-jitsu guys grapple 3 days a week. They go round after round. Now, do they go as hard as the 20-year-olds? Maybe not, right? And can they do it every day that hard? No, but they're still in the game. So you just have to kind of be sensible how you train and keep at it. And, there's no magic age when, now I'm old. You know what I mean? People really, I think a lot of times it's just an excuse for them because they don't want to work out. Right. So you want to be sensible about it, but if your goal is to learn those kind of things, you can still do it.
Yeah. And obviously you've been training a long time, but would you find that jiu-jitsu or any type of martial art that does have a very practical aspect is still something that a person even in their 40s, 50s, 60s could get into, barring some sort of risky health condition or anything like that? Would that be something that they could still do?
Yeah, I've seen it dozens and dozens of times with people that age or older. So, of course, now, right, you have to be sensible. I mean, even if you're young and you're out of shape, you have to be sensible when you start. You know what I mean? You've got to work your way into certain things. You got to be careful sometimes at the academy as well. I mean, teachers need to be cognizant of the fact that you might have a limitation, or you're a little older, or whatever that case may be. But yeah, sure, of course, you can start at just about any level and work your way into, work your way up, get in better shape, even more technique. People in general, the vast majority of people that do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu are cool about it. I mean, if you're, like, say somebody's 60 some years old and he's just starting out, the young guys are not going to beat the shit out of him because they can. Everybody's very cool. They'll help them out, and you kind of go at their level, right? So I think that's feel intimidating. You watch, two 25-year-old black belts go at it. That's two 25-year-old black belts. They're not going to go that hard with someone who just started. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I can understand if you saw that, you'd be like, wow, that's too much. But you don't start at that level. Right. So just like anything, you start your way. You start at an entry level kind of level of difficulty and work your way up. Right. So yeah, it's definitely can be done.
What would be your general approach to fitness and conditioning in this regard to jiu-jitsu, martial arts in general, even the internal martial arts? Would you say that the forms or doing the both solo movements and grappling be enough, or should there be kind of extra work done outside of it?
It depends on what your what you mean by solo movements, and it depends on what level of fitness you want to achieve. So, like, my MMA fighters, it's a 6 hour a day, 6 days a week training protocol, right? Is that for the person? No. Do you have to be in that good a shape to defend yourself, or even compete in kind of amateur sports? No. So it depends. If you want to fight in the ring, like an MMA fight, you want to be a pro, then it's necessary. So you gotta, again, you have to look at what you have to look at your goal. Like, what's your goal? If you say you're 35, and you've never done jiu-jitsu, and you start, and you say, I want to compete in a year, I want to try it, I want to try to it's a whole different level. And if you said, well, I'm going to train a couple, 3 days a week, and I want to get some basic skill, and I want to roll, and I can defend myself, all that's good. Yeah, you'll be in good shape. Then you say, now I want to compete, and you got to get in better shape. You know what I mean? It depends on the level. Now, grappling, any kind of, real fight training is hard. You want to, anybody listening who's wrestled in high school, there you go. It'll be like that. Or anybody who's boxed a little or done judo seriously, it's always a fairly high level of physical training to a certain extent. It's just the way it is, or you just can't do it, right? It's never going to be easy. But on the other hand, you don't have to train like a pro MMA fighter either, just to be in the game.
Right.
So doing forms, for example, like your average forms, they're not going to get you in good enough shape to fight.
Right.
That in general, they're just not.
Right.
They're not designed for that.
Right.
Yeah. So internal, especially. I mean, some forms I don't know other martial arts, but now if you're completely out of shape and even doing like some kind of gentle taiji is going to be hard at first, right? Because you're completely out of shape. But once you're in shape, the forms are not designed. Forms are not bodybuilding, and they're not cardio. Although they might make you stronger to a certain extent, and they'll get you in better shape than if you didn't do any. They're designed to teach you their attribute training, right? So
Okay.
Forms can teach you about like rhythm and coordination, footwork, where to put your balance, right? How to have mind body unity, where to focus your intent, all those things. That's what they're designed for. The guys who designed them, like if say they're some like military guy, well, their soldiers ran and they did heavy calisthenics and lifted heavy stuff. You know what I mean? No, It wasn't like we got to figure out how to condition them with forms. That wasn't the purpose. So, for the average person, if you did forms an hour a day and they're fairly rigorous, I'd keep you in okay shape. I mean, it'd be very, very good for your health. Is it going to be good enough shape to compete in the ring? No, it wasn't just, it's not designed for that.
Right.
So, that's what that's everyone calls supplementary training, right? So you're going to have some supplementary training.
Right. Would you generally recommend more kind of like a body weight approach, or typically would you add in kind of an external weight training to really help build up someone who, say hypothetically wanted to compete at, jiu-jitsu for the first time, or in the kickboxing or Sanda or something like that?
The fastest way to get just strength is lifting weights in general, right?
Okay.
So and if you want to be extremely strong, you're going to probably have to lift something heavy. Having said that, like I never lifted. My entire training, my whole career has been bodyweight exercises, and in my own weight classes, especially. I mean, I felt people that were stronger than me, but never kind of out of the ballpark. But it depends what you mean by body weight. So, guys that could say military press a ton of weight still can't do a one-arm pull-up. You know what I mean? So so I think a lot of times people think, well, body weight exercises are easy because it's only my weight, and that's not necessarily true. Right. So it depends how you exercise. Like if you can hold like I have kind of a minimum, not test, but kind of a minimum of fitness for guys who want to compete, and it's based on not how much weight you can lift, because you don't really lift. It's not really what you're going to do when you're in the ring. Right. So, for example, but I have nothing against lifting weights, obviously. So if you like, if I was a young pro fighter, I would lift weights. I would incorporate some weightlifting into my training. Most of my guys my MMA fighters lift some weight. There's not a heavy emphasis on it though, because the other training kind of covers it. But for example, if you can't do, say, I don't know, something on average, if you can't do 10 dead hang pull-ups, if you say you can't hold a handstand against the wall for a minute or two, these kind of things, you're probably not ready to compete at anything. So I would emphasize things like that over, can you military press, your weight, or can you bench press? All that's good too, but you'll find when it comes to, say, grappling, for example, you don't lift a lot of weight, you move yourself, kind of thing, right? And you have to have good frame and endurance and all those kind of things. So that's going to be a little more important than like the limit weight you can lift. So my own training is, my whole career has been primarily bodyweight exercises, but I mean, you have to do some fairly strenuous ones if you want to, actually be in shape enough to compete.
Right.
And cardio and all those things too. And then of course you're training hard with other people, right? When you're wrestling, you're always exerting force, or you're boxing, you're always exerting force, that kind of thing.
Right. Okay, Tim. Well, we're about 40 minutes in, and just wanted to, ask you: is there anywhere people kind of reach out to you, and if they wanted to come train in Southern California with you, or wanted to find out if you had seminars or workshops going on throughout the country?
So I can give my I have it's an old website. I don't do much on it, but there's some info on there. Shenwu.com, SHENWU.com.
Mm-hmm.
My email address is on there. My email address is the same thing, shenwu@verizon.net. So if anyone wants to email me, I'm happy to answer. I'm on Facebook. You can look up Tim Cartmell. The academy is Ace Jiu-Jitsu, JiuJitsu. You can contact us through Ace, and that's probably it. Probably the best ways to get in touch.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate you coming on here, being the first guest for the podcast, and maybe in a little while we can come back around and kind of talk a little bit more about this type of stuff, and go from there.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. So everyone, I hope you really enjoyed it. I think you guys probably did. And I just want to, thank you for listening and tuning into the radio here. And just if you really enjoyed the podcast, especially this interview and the first episode as well, I'd greatly appreciate if you head to patreon.com/Ground Dragon MA, and just contribute $1 per month, just to help support the production of this podcast and any other items produced by Ground Dragon Martial Arts. And this way we can really make sure that we get some good quality material in there, and it kind of covers any expense that just producing this might. So I appreciate you listening in. Thank you, and you guys have a great day.